Hello, everybody. Before I start, I just want to congratulate Mr. Tim Reynolds, okay, who's Mr. 518, which is my area code in Schenectady, New York, and Albany in the Tri-Capital District for being selected into the New York State Hall of Fame. Well, come on, Tim. I'm not even in it. And he's the first writer to do that, so I wish he was writing for my coach, the late Walt Prisblow, back in 1960 to 63. Of course, were you even born then? So I'll just sort of start with this. Until you change the way you go about doing the things that are necessary to win, whatever they are, those things you're doing to try to win, if they aren't working, must change. And so that doesn't mean that change is a sinister word here. There's a lot of elements to go into a culture, the erosion of a culture, being together for 30 years, generational change, problems in the NBA, that are league-wide when it comes to health, it comes to players missing games and availability. You take a look at all the young, sort of up-and-coming, they haven't tasted it yet, OKC, Minnesota, Indiana, Boston with their new group, Orlando, et cetera, et cetera. For some reason, these guys are playing 70 to 80 games. It's a feeling more than anything else. But that's definitely a deep dive for us this summer into player availability. So we have to change some things, but we surely are not going to rip anything apart here, Okay, that's my statement.
Pat, at the start of the season, you said that there's a shelf life for a core, and there's a shelf life for a core,
Maybe.
if you will. After 5 years, if you don't get it done, you have to think about what if. Where are you in that process now about?
Going into year 6. When you go back to 2006, we all know that story. When we saw Dwayne, Chris Bosh, and, LeBron James sign the contracts and the extensions that were going to take them all to 2010. So we had to prepare for that. The Shaq window had closed. And the first 2 years of Spo's coaching career were playoff years, but we were getting ready for that, that year. So that took about 4 years to get ready for it, but we really didn't have championship aspirations, but we had winning aspirations, and we had a great player in Dwayne, And Michael Beasley is a guy I loved to death that had to be sacrificed in 2010. After the big three, I'll never forget my first exit meeting with LeBron after the 2011 loss. And so I'm sitting there with Chris Bosh, and he and I are having a nice conversation. It was a pretty miserable time for all those guys, banging their head against the wall, and except for Dwayne, for 7 years never winning, and then getting together in the first year is like that. We just didn't have enough depth. And so I was talking to Chris. I was still talking to Chris, and LeBron came in, just pushed the door open and walked in. He said, "It's 12:30." That was his time. So he walked over to the window, opened up the blind, and just sort of stared out. And Chris sort of got the vibe. He says, I'll see you later. So he sat down and just stared at me. He just stared at me. And we didn't say a word, I'm gonna tell him that he has to improve on this, he's gonna have to improve on this, you gotta do more of this, you gotta be a better leader, you gotta be all that BS and all that stuff to probably at that time the greatest player in the game. And I looked at him, and after a couple of minutes, I just said, I have to go to work on the roster and make it deeper. Shane Battier, Mike Miller, Ray Allen, Chris Anderson, along with Mario Chalmers, that whole group, Udonis. Once we got the support, and we went to the finals. It had a 2-1 lead in 2011, and then we let that thing get away, from that standpoint. But that whole 5-year thing, I think, is an evaluation number. Once LeBron left, we signed Chris, and we thought we were putting together a real good team. And then, Chris, God bless him, ended up getting ill. And so that window was there in belief, and then it wasn't. And then after, that, from 16, 17, 18, 19, we missed the playoffs a couple of times, and we got Jimmy Butler. We went after a player we felt that could really help Bam, Tyler. Tyler was a rookie that year, I think, and we ended up going to the finals the first year in the bubble. The next year was a short season, I think, and we got swept by the champions, the Milwaukee Bucks. And third year, we're a jump shot away from the finals, I think. It was Golden State's last championship. They came back and beat Boston at Boston Garden. And then Denver last year in the finals. And so here, we get eliminated again, in the first round. So there are things you have to really look at that are good. Who moves the needle the most, on our team is Jimmy. Jimmy moves the needle the most. He's an incredible player. And what I said at the beginning about change is he's got to give it some thought himself, for this thing to be what he really wants it to be. And I want it to be, and Mickey and everybody else. So this 5-year window, we've been pretty successful. We haven't won the chip, and I think that bothers everybody. But our organization is not about rebuilding. I'll never use the word. We'll retool as if we're rebuilding to try to make it better. We've always done that. And we're not going to avoid anything if we have an opportunity to bring in who we think is the critical piece. There's only a couple of them in the league, for Christ's sake. But for the most part, we have to try to control those things we can control, player availability, all these things that we have to take a hard look at, offense and defensive. You have to look at them. So that's what this is about now. This is about internal discussions, real thoughts. You start talking about the draft more than anything else right now. We got 2 picks. I can't believe we have to wait 2 days to get 2 picks, but I'll go for that. They should have picks 3, 4, and 5 also, so we don't have to worry about signing 2-way players. We can get those guys that, that Chet and Adam and Ams all want right after the draft, so let us pick 3, 4, and 5 too that night. But anyhow, that's a long answer to your short question.
Pat, I know you guys have a few months to discuss this and make a final decision, but as of now, do you feel like you guys will offer Jimmy the max extension he's eligible for, and what are the factors that go into that decision?
Well, we don't have to do that for a year. So we have not discussed that internally right now, but we have to look at that, making that kind of commitment, okay? And when do we do it? I mean, we don't have to do it until 25, actually, but we'll see. We haven't made a decision on it, and we really haven't really in earnest discussed it. So we'll just see what happens, Anthony.
With Jimmy's extension window opening July 7th, though, he can request an extension starting on that date. Typically, in his past, he has done that. Typically, there has been, I don't want to say pressure, but there has been
Never been
discussion.
any pressure. There's no pressure.
Okay.
The last extension was, we gave it to him.
So when Jimmy approaches July 7th for an extension, what will the Miami Heat's response be at that date that his extension window opens?
Well, I mean, if he requests, we can either accept, or we can say, we're going to think about it, or we have not made a decision on it. I think you can make too much out of this. He's still got 2 years left on a contract. Theoretically, he's got a player opt. But that's something that we have to give some real thought to based on a lot of factors. I don't want to go through the litany of factors right now because they all blow up into different hypotheticals. But yeah, that's a big decision on our part to commit, that kind of those kinds of resources, unless you have somebody who's really going to be there, available every single night. That's the truth.
And then just to follow up on that, instead of talking in circles, Jimmy has not played more than, I believe, 64 games since he's been here. He offered us comments during the preseason that he expected to miss X amount of games. Is there any pressure the team can put on him to get him play more? Has that been discussed when you met with Jimmy on Friday?
No, I didn't meet with Butler on Friday.
And where, well, the team did. Where does the team stand?
What team met with Butler on Friday?
I thought Jimmy was in here on Friday.
He wasn't in my office.
Okay.
I didn't meet with Bam or Jimmy.
Okay, I apologize on that. Is there any internal thought of approaching Jimmy with X amount of games in mind? And how did you feel this season, just when I believe the third game of the season was missed for rest? There were illness times when he missed games. Can you just let us know how you feel about those moments? I know in the moment you stay, out of the picture because Spo is coaching, but now after the fact, how did you feel at those moments to see the missed time, sometimes in crucial games?
That was discussed prior to last year. We had a discussion with his agent about that. That was discussed thoroughly. And so there's a gray area during the regular season. And as I mentioned, as far as, what changes is that, when it comes to player availability, I'm just going to, go on a little bit out of the box here. This whole injury reporting stuff that we have to do night in and night out, day in and day out, Tim, and, getting the accurate things. I can remember there was a time when we never reported any injuries because you then became a target. If I was coaching against somebody who had a bad shoulder, I'm going to run them off picks all the time. If I'm somebody that's coaching against somebody who's got a sprained wrist, hard fouls on that wrist. I mean, it's just, so we never like to talk about injuries because we felt, one, it's an excuse, and two, that why give the opposition the ability to possibly re-injure a guy who's playing hurt, so, from that standpoint. I don't understand the 65-game rule. I really don't. I know it. I know why they did it, but I don't understand why they said it's okay to miss, at least they're auto-suggesting to the players and agent, it's okay to miss, 17 games. And to me, that sends a message that it's okay to take a little more time, maybe to get to be 100%, when nobody in this league is 100%. Nobody is. And then there's the injured players, the guys who really are hurt and debilitated, and they take a long time to recover. So that was discussed, Ira, but I won't tell you what came out of the meeting. That was a year ago, yeah.
Pat, if you guys determine over the coming weeks and months that your non-Jimmy and non-Bam assets are not enough to appeal to other teams to get a quality player back, an all-star, someone of that ilk in return, would you then at that point have to at least be open to considering a trade for Jimmy?
No. Not right now. I appreciate the question, but that one is that, as Spo said the other day, I concur with everything that Spo said because he and I had discussed this, is that there's a possibility that a lot of things are on the table, from that standpoint. And it's not necessarily getting another star, You get another star and then your bench gets weaker, probably. And you do have some financial responsibilities to, the tax and the first apron, the second apron, and all the consequences of going there. And so that's why I say there might be 2 or 3 critical players maybe in this league if they ever became available and we had an opportunity, then there's no doubt that we would go for it, shoot the moon, it's what it is. We've always been that way. But, there were 8 teams in the tax this year. 6 of them are home. Okay? And who is it? Boston and somebody else is playing. Denver, yeah. So going into the tax and going way into the tax to win a championship, you better be damn right about the guy you're going to get and what you're going to give up for him. And so it didn't happen even with the big 3 until we solidified the bench the next year. Yeah. Yes.
Pat, beyond the availability question, as Jimmy ages, and he's going to be 35 years old this year, I know players take better care of themselves these days, but we're talking about mid-30s into late 30s. Are you confident that he can still be a 1A type player to lead this team to a championship, provided that he's healthy in the playoffs if you put the right pieces?
Yes. I think he has that ability, but it's like, it's like anybody else. You might have to make some changes in your overall routine, your approach to the game, whatever it is. It's, and it's the same thing with me and Spo. I mean, Spo has to take a deep dive into the offense and the defense. We're 21st ranked in offense and 5th ranked in defense. Sometimes you don't think you are. But it's not the overall ranking in the league or position. It's all those elements that you measure, the metrics inside of your offense or defense. Where do you rank in closeouts? Where do you rank in contests? Where do you rank in blockouts? Where do you rank in loose balls and charges and all of those things? There's 4 or 5 critical areas that you want to win every night, even though you might not win the transition game. But there's 4 or 5 real areas that you want to win every single night, and you might be ranking, 17th in one of those areas and ranked 5th in overall defense. And so that's taking a deep dive into what you're doing and what's important.
Hi, Pat. Can you just kind of talk about what you've seen from Bam this season? I know he's up for an extension as well, but can you just talk about how critical he is to the future of this organization?
Bam is now going into his 7th year next year already. My God, time flies. And his growth spurt from his rookie year to what he is right now has been off the chart. Everybody knows in the league what his game is. They all know what he does for us, how important he is for us in a lot of areas. And so he has to expand also his game. I remember in 1986, after we got beat by Houston, Magic came into me and he said, we have to change some things. I have to change. I have to start shooting threes. Back when threes weren't being shot more than 10 a game, he said, I got to become a better outside shooter in all of this. And I said, no, we need to get the ball to Byron Scott and to James Worthy as our first 2 options ahead of Kareem, because Kareem was like, 38 at that time. And so he said, no, I got to become a scorer. So we put him in pick and rolls and all that stuff. And he actually at that time in 86, he's already 6-7 years in, won 3 championships. He made the changes to become a greater shooter, a better post-up player. The baby skyhook all of a sudden was what came into it. And so Bam has to look at his game and sit with coach. How can he get better and expand his game? But he's at a point right now where he's an all-NBA player, and we're happy to have him.
Hey, Pat, you talked a little bit about the luxury taxes. One of the goals this summer to trim payroll and reduce the stress against that second tax?
Well,
saving?
it's like a moving target. You don't know. And when you start putting things up on the board and how it impacts your payroll and tax and all of that stuff, what it would cost to bring somebody in, who's going to leave, who's going to stay. I mean, we don't even know. We can talk to our free agents, right after the finals, and H and also Caleb. I wish the NBA would have a tampering period, like the NFL. They have right after the draft. You can start talking, to people before it's a 6 o'clock, mishmash on July the 1st when everybody's calling everybody and deals have already been announced and all that stuff. So that's something we have to figure out. Yeah, you got to put a pencil to the bottom line too. And then also you have to put a pencil to what the cost is going to be in the collateral damage of going over the first and the second apron and then the repeater tax. This is a business as well as it is anything else.
Pat, last year you talked about.
Will I am?
Well, yes.
Oh my God.
That's a terrible joke. Terrible dad joke. Getting too old.
You were great on the F1 yesterday.
Thanks, Pat. I really appreciate that. Last year you talked about the core of having the youth of Tyler and Bam, and obviously Jimmy being Jimmy coming off that big playoff run last year. Have your thoughts changed now, even less than a year later, on what this core is capable of? You talked about player availability and concept change, but I'm talking about roster change with this particular core of Tyler, Bam, and Jimmy moving forward.
Everything gets diluted. Well, and what I mean by that, we talk a lot about continuity and consistency, and the players talked a lot about that to me in the meeting, my exit meetings with them, continuity and consistency and all that stuff. Because when you're losing a myriad of players, for extended periods of time, or even 3 or 4 games or whatever, and somebody comes in, like Tyler missed 40 games this year. So if somebody came in and all of a sudden became very productive, that was Duncan, all of a sudden took on a lot more responsibility, became one of our best pick and roll players and all of that stuff. And so then when Tyler comes back, a lot of players lose those minutes where they are consistent. But, from that standpoint, it's sort of hard to really measure your roster. I would love to have 1 through 9 or 1 through 10 or whatever it is available. Give me 72 games. I'll take 72, at different times. But the NBA has to address all this, not just us. And having discussions, with, the training staff, talking with, weight trainers, the strength training staff. A lot of players have their own sort of off-the-court coaches and trainers and therapists and all of this stuff. And who knows that somewhere something isn't conflicting with what we do here in our training room or in the weight room, et cetera, or with nutrition or mental health or whatever. So those are the dives that you have to do into those factors that how much can we control that? I'm not going to ever accuse a player who can't play that he doesn't want to play or he's not able to play. But there's no such thing as 100% in the NBA. There just isn't, And so, we'd like to have a consistent rotation, and I think all those numbers inside of the 21st or offense and 5th offense would be better, and those metrics would be better. So I hate to talk about analytics, but it's starting to show some things. And I think we did a thing the other day, and don't tell me how the formula is when it comes to win shares. Okay, there's a formula there. I just get the result. That could mean a difference between 3 and 4 wins if these combinations were together, So, or it could be more, it could be less.
Pat, you talked in your introduction about the building of a culture, erosion of culture. Do you feel like your culture was eroded this year? It sounds like no.
No, it's just that I think no. Is it that the way it was 20 years ago? No, it's not that. And that was okay 20 years ago, and the players accepted that, and players played 70, 80, 90, whatever they did. It's not that way. The generational change in these contemporary players today, younger players that, hell, don't even know what 20 years ago was about, how they conduct their lives, how they train, what they take as important. You're either in or out, you're either with or against everything that it is that we're talking about trying to do to win. And if we're not getting it, then we have to change some things and come to some different conclusions, but did it erode? That's something that we're going to talk about. And where was the erosion? Where is it? And that's going to be discussed, Dave. Yeah.
Pat, this weekend, Jimmy Butler had said, if he was healthy, that Boston would have gone home. I know it's tough to live in hypotheticals, but if he was able to play and Terry was able to play, did you feel like the gulf has gotten way too big with you in Boston, or if you had your guys, that it might have been more competitive?
We played, I've been involved in competition and playoffs against certain opponents that turned into hate, even since we've been here, I hate to use that word, but the competition gets so tough that you don't like one another. And so we played Boston 4 times, I think, in the playoffs since Jimmy's been here. So, you do develop some dislike for the other team, but they are, this year, I think, the best team in the league, with the best roster in the league. They made some great moves. Brad Stevens did a great job in getting Holiday and Porzingis. They built their bench a little bit differently. And, for him to say that, I thought, is that Jimmy trolling or is that Jimmy serious? If you're not on the court playing against Boston or on the court playing against the New York Knicks, you should keep your mouth shut. And your criticism of those teams.
Just looking at the roles of Jaime and Nico this season, just the impact that they had in the production, they ended up starting, obviously, in that series you're talking about. Just how have you viewed their development, and just where do you see them ultimately getting to?
Talking about Nico and Jaime? Right. They're 2 great pieces for us. It all happened like that for Nico. Last year he went through, the back issues. The learning curve was off the charts. Still, we saw something. This year, when we put him in the game, I think you could see from, 70 to 80% of his game, this guy is going to have some talent. And it's all about repetitions and IQ and learning and learning and learning more. It's a new way of conditioning for a 20-year-old guy that has to, I think, cardio more than anything else. You don't want to make him big and muscular. He's a great athlete. He's got great instincts. He's unselfish, and he's a good rebounder. He's coast-to-coast guy. So in Jaime, if he had not gotten hurt with the groin earlier in the season, I think, and if he hadn't, because he plays, he would have played 82 games. He ended up playing 75 games, and believe me, he was hurting when he missed those games. But he's a proud young warrior that will play every night for you, and he hit a wall somewhat with the first groin injury, and then we went through other injuries. Then his role changed a little bit. Then he sat down for a while, and he came in and out, and that doesn't help a player. Continuity and consistency is every night I know what I'm going to get. So if we're paying 1 through 8, 9 to be those players, and then you get a rookie, at 18 that all of a sudden shows out, you say you're pretty fortunate, like we were with Bam and Tyler, Nico, and with Jaime. So we like our base. We like those 2 guys, a lot.
Obviously, injuries kept Tyler out for half the season, but how would you assess Tyler's season and maybe what you guys learned about him?
When he played 42 games this year, well, he's been fragile a little bit, and broke his hand last year in the playoffs. He had some injuries, earlier in his career, and there isn't anybody who works, harder at his game. And Spo's correct. He works and puts the time in. He put the time in the weight room. So how does he keep his calorie intake? And he might have to go to another level nutritionally. he's gotten stronger, but as the season progresses, you lose some of that. You don't pound the iron like you do, in the off season. But he's got to make some adjustments, definitely, And we as a league have almost gotten to a point where everybody plays the same game. I mean, every night you can watch a team and say, well, they're like the Heat. The Heat's like Indiana. And they all play, it's a high pick and roll, it's ISOs, it's multiple handoffs, he's one of those guys that's a shot taker and maker. And we have to do more to give him that kind of space, but he has to do more to be able to deal with, with a defense that is committed to just stopping you. So he got overloaded, not here. I mean, with Holiday and with White and with Brown and Pritchard, they were like, no, not him. Anybody else can beat us, but not him, especially after game 2 in Bam. And so it made it hard. When you lose Jimmy and Terry and not have those other threats out there, they can't do that kind of stuff. So, but we talked a little bit about, look, it's always going to be about getting stronger, getting your body ready for that kind of physicality. So his major injuries are real, and so we just hope we can get through a season where he's playing, in that 72 to 82 game basis. Maybe one year he will surprise everybody and play every game. He's had some. I remember James Worthy went through some early injuries in his rookie and second year, and he sort of got over them, and so it happens sometimes to players.
Is there any clarity that you could provide on Terry Rozier's neck injury and if it's a long-term concern at all?
Well, I see him with a neck brace on, so he's doing everything that he's supposed to do. I met with him the other day, and he said he felt good, but this is a process, by which it takes time. He gets hit, he hits the floor hard, he gets, on pick and rolls, he gets screened. I mean, I'm surprised that, even with Duncan, with his back injury, this, when you're dealing with the spine, you don't mess around. We were not going to mess around with Terry, and he wanted to play desperately, so he couldn't. That's it. So that, it's going to heal. The doctors are going to they convinced us and him that in time this thing will heal and it will go away.
Only because we didn't get a chance to talk to you when it happened. What was the importance of locking up Eric for 8 years? And I don't think anybody would have been surprised if you had said 80 years for Eric, but what was the significance of giving him a pretty unprecedented deal?
Well, he deserves it. And look, are we different than other teams? Darvin Ham, just left the Lakers. I think he was the 6th coach in the last 13 years or something like that. So I don't know. I believe in continuity, and I'm not just making that example to make it, but it's easy to really step up and say, no, we want stability. I mean, he's been with the organization. He's a hell of a coach, and to tie him up, because he could have been a free agent, and could be anywhere. So. And I think that leads to organizational stability too with your players, and especially in basketball operations. And I know he has great respect in the NBA by a lot of players. Word gets around, how he coaches, and the fact that players who come to him and his staff that develop, and there's a plethora of them, that come and develop. Other players see that, and they have career years, or all of a sudden they have career contracts, they have career opportunities, and it's a credit to him. So sometimes you have to lose those guys, and can't sign everybody. Somebody's coming in, somebody's going out. Somebody's coming in, somebody's going out. So it was all about stability, and from that standpoint.
Pat, you made a significant move earlier in the year when you traded a first-round pick and Kyle Lowry for Terry Rozier. I know you spoke about the injury there, but what did you think of what you saw, what you got to see from him before the injury, and just moving forward with him on the team?
Exactly what his reputation is, from that standpoint. Scary Terry, I mean, he had some games where it was all right there. But I do think after the trade, it took a while for him to settle in. Everybody's telling him, be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. Well, being himself in Charlotte is different than being himself here in Miami. But we're happy to have him. Our offense, at 21, we needed more firepower. We felt that he could give it to us, and he did. So that's all going to have to sort itself out with Spo and the staff, with our key guys who we depend on to score. But Terry was everything that I expected. I had a great conversation with him, about some things. He's open. He wanted to know from me what I thought about what he can do, even at his age, which is still young. And I gave him my opinion, and I'm sure he'll work on it. But he was a great addition for us, absolutely.
Pat, most teams would gladly take what you all have accomplished these last 5 years, 3 deep runs, 2 NBA Finals appearances. That said, knowing you've been the eighth seed the last 2 years, knowing there were several blowout losses to good teams at home, not a great home record, 2-12 against good teams down the stretch, was there a point where you, Nick, and Mickey sat and said to yourselves, we need to make major changes with this roster? And do you feel that way? Major changes?
No, not right now. You don't, no. I mean, not the kind of changes that you're suggesting and talking about. So we just want to try to control some of the things that maybe we lost control of, whatever they are, or a little bit of control. But I'm always open, ears wide open, or I'm not doing my job, And so if anything were ever to happen, I would listen and obviously convey it with them. But my 30 years here, even with the team that I knew couldn't win a championship, I wasn't selling the championship, and I wasn't just wanting the team to be successful. I truly believe that any team that I coached, and if you had 2 or 3 great players, that you got a shot. Just take a look at what we did last year, Had Jimmy hit that 3 the year before against Boston, we could have been in there back-to-back. I don't know, but we got a really good group of guys, and the number one issue is player availability and having your guys healthy to play every night. And we have to wrap our arms around that notion, from that standpoint. So that's where we are. But look, when I talk to Mickey and Nick, they understand this as well as I do now. They want to win, and if I bring something to them that they go, wow, let's go. It's always let's go. It was let's go with Zoe, let's go with Tim, let's go with Shaq, let's go, with the big 3. You have to sort of be sure when you're going to go all in, on that stuff. So I'm not going to bring him something that's just going to make us maybe a little bit better. It's going to cost us a lot more.
Pat, this has been a popular fan topic over the past couple of years.
Are you taking this like a video of me?
Yeah, is that okay? Oh, no?
Okay. Ethan.
I don't know. You look good. I guess. This has been a popular fan topic, but also your former team captain actually came out and said something the other day that this team is best when Tyler is the 6th man.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any of those conversations with him? Wayne came off the bench here, Dragic came off the bench, and Tyler has come off the bench and been effective here. Is that a conversation you've had with Tyler?
That's a narrative that's out there. Everybody who has that narrative knows more than I do. So they must know more than I know to say that about Tyler. Tyler's a starter, and is that going to be something that you would ask a player one day, whether it be he or Rozier or somebody else one day? I mean, that's where a coach has a job to do. That's what he gets paid for, you know. So whatever is in the best interest of the team, because we don't know until you have everybody sort of available, how the whole thing works, you know. But the only thing I think true about what Udonis said, and he has to understand that, you know, he works for the Heat, you know. So, and you know, like, go for it, okay. But he works for the Heat, and I had that conversation with him because I think he's really good, you know, on NBA TV or ESPN on the studio shows, and I think he and Mike Miller are funny as hell on his podcast. They chop it up, you know. Half the stories are a lie, you know, especially the ones about me, you know, are embellished. But yeah, he probably should have kept that to himself. But I'm sure that, you know, Amy and Jax and Eric and John, you know, Jose, you know, they work for us, but they know how to get to that point in a real good way. You know, I think that is our organization. You know, we have one voice, and that voice is all of our voices, but one guy who's going to distribute that information is Eric. Because with the nature of today's media, if I'm talking to the media every week, then there's always going to be conflict. Spo and I argue a lot, but I don't want to put it in the media, you know, about things. And God bless all you guys. You have a job to do, and he's going to have to understand. The only thing that was true, really, about what he said the other day, he said, I know Riles home right after that game at 3 a.m. flying back, and that he's already upset and he's miserable, and he's going to get to the bottom of it tonight. No. When I got in at 2:30, I changed. I went to the bar. I turned the game on. It was on replay. I turned the volume down. I put 2 ounces of Pantaloni's, okay, tequila, along with some lime juice, 3 ice cubes, and I sipped it for 2 hours watching that damn game. I didn't want to hear it. I just want to watch it. And I realized how good Boston was, you know. So, and then I finally, you know, when my sleeping medication kicked in, I went to bed and slept till noon the next day. And then got ready for exit meeting. So, yeah, I had about 8 hours to be miserable. All right, Coach. Anything else? Thank you, everybody. Great year. Appreciate y'all.